back on the Newsfeed PM, and thanks for staying on. Elon Musk's Starlink company seems as if it's not giving up on operating in South Africa just yet, after a recent proposal to relax ownership rules for communications company Starlink has now come to the table themselves. Starlink has offered to pay for a connection of 5,000 rural schools in South Africa to their satellite internet service. So will the offer get the deal over the line or change anything? Let's chat now to Staff Magazine editor Toby Shapshak. Good to have you again, Toby. Dangling a carrot is Elon Musk's to say, well, it's 500 million. I'll connect 5,000 rural schools. Get this policy across the line. Should South Africa bite, or should they be a little bit more cautious still?
Look, I think the awareness has certainly come through the establishment and certainly communication, Mr. Solly Malatsi, and the regulator that asking an international company to give up a 30% ownership stake in a subsidiary is not going to work, and it doesn't work in the broader ICT sector where companies like Microsoft or Amazon or Google simply don't do that, but they do what's called equity equivalent investment programs. There's a whole acronym for this, of course. And what it means is that instead of giving up an ownership stake, they invest money. Toyota does this in the car industry, so does BMW. It's a different way of creating a form of redress for the historically disproportionate distribution of wealth in the apartheid years. So what Starlink has offered off their own bat is to connect 5,000 schools. I think that's a good opening gambit. I'm quite sure there are a lot more government schools that would need such internet connectivity. 5,000 rural schools, they say, but it's a good start. What can I say? These are, there seems to be no other way to get these kids online or these schools online, and certainly not at the broadband speeds that are available through Starlink. So it looks like a good place to start, and I'm quite sure a bit of nifty negotiations, schmuggling, as we'd call it in Yiddish. We can probably get a lot more rural schools connected.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure whether 5,000 school is a tip of the iceberg. How much of a hole is there that government needs to really feel that to say, well, I'll give you some 500 million would be enough of a hook?
Yeah, I don't know how these deals get structured and what the negotiations are. But for instance, I know a lot of the service providers have told me that the fiber service providers, if when they're rolling out fiber, they pass a school or there's a school on the network, they give the school free internet access. Rumor told me that when they were rolling out. The guys from Vox told me that that's what they do with schools as well. So I think this is pretty a common cause. If you're an internet service provider, you give access to schools for free if you can or where you can. So I think this is a pretty standard practice. What would it cost to do 5,000 schools? Well, we can calculate it. I know it's about $50 per school. Per Starlink link. That's then you've got to pay. That's $50 a month. Then you've got to pay for the base station. We don't know what those costs are going to be, but I'm basing these on the fees in Botswana where there is a service. I had a look at that to see what the possible costs could be. So it's a chunk of change, but these are. This is for someone to negotiate, and I think what we should take from this, what's heartening to take from this, is that there is some kind of dialogue going on. There is movement with getting Starlink into the country when it didn't seem like it was possible, a month ago.
Now, let's talk about that particular dialogue that is going on. I mean, their senior director for market access is saying that Starlink is fully committed to providing its services as a legal compliant company. Does that indicate that they are willing at least to abide by the laws of the country?
I mean, I would assume so. I mean, I'm sure that's just the way press releases or statements are put together. I wrote a story based on the same statement for stuff on how this is what they're offering to do. So they're clearly making all the right noises. They're saying, if you let us apply for a license without having to give up a 30% ownership stake, we will do X, Y, and Z. And I assume that's the conversation most big companies would have when they come into the country. And the director you're quoting, I think his name's Ryan Good Enough or Good Night.
Good night. Yeah.
Good Night. Yes, he said. They operate in 150 countries, and it's not their policy to give up a direct ownership stake, but they do such equity investments. So I think this is a good sign. Will we have Starlink by Christmas? I don't know. Let's have this conversation in the near future. But if I was a teacher in a rural school or a kid in a rural school, I'd get excited. It's it does look like connectivity is gonna reach those schools, and it's a fantastic service from what I've heard and what I've read. Lots of people rave about it. You can get it pretty much anywhere. It's if it's $50 a month,
yeah.
It's connectivity. One of my neighbors in my street his family lives in Zimbabwe. I've been speaking to him for years about how to get connectivity. And as soon as Starlink became available, he bought a unit, and it's geo-locked. So you can only use it in the particular part of Zimbabwe he comes from. But that's, now they have connectivity. So for $50 a month, his family is online and he can speak to them, and he can speak to them at broadband speeds.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
There's one hurdle so that will remain, that they still, even providing 5,000 rural schools connectivity, they can't get over. One is the fact that they want to retain sole ownership of all subsidiaries globally. They're saying this is for operational purposes, but there will be other players who will be saying that, well, that's an unfair advantage. And if you're saying you're committed to leveling the playing field for the entire sector, not just a specific operator, you need to do away with that.
So I hear your arguments, but I'm not sure I'm the person to commentate on that. I'm very problem-solving orientated, if there's such a phrase. It's like, do we want our kids online? Yes or no? This international company is not going to give up ownership, nor will Microsoft, nor will Amazon, or Google, or Toyota, or BMW. It's ridiculous to have this conversation if it's only in one sector, which is telecoms, wherein the broader ICT sector, that requirement isn't there. The broader ICT sector has BBBE laws or guidelines that say you can do these equivalence investments, as opposed to telecoms, which specifically has this very strict ownership structure. What do we want to get out of it? Do we want our schools to be connected, or do we want to, argue about whether BE has reached its sell-by date or not? I don't know. I'm not the person to have that conversation with you. Lots of other people have it in the columns and opinion sections of newspapers and websites all the time. And it is an interesting conversation. But at the end of the day, if you ask me what do I want that kid in a rural school to be able to read anything they want on Wikipedia, or watch Khan Academy, or, watch tutorials on YouTube. I want that for that kid in the rural area. If you're insisting a global company give up 30% and they say we're just not going to do that, how is enforcing this law going to make our country better? That's one way of looking at it. But I'm not the person to talk about it. I can tell you that having very fast internet connectivity is a great enabler. Look at this. I'm speaking to you on a fiber line. I say to people all the time, if you have fiber, you're part of the internet 1%. If you have a postpaid cell phone contract, you're part of the global internet 1%. I'm speaking to you on a 200 megabit fiber line from Vuma and through Vox. It's extraordinary. Look at what is possible. On a Saturday afternoon, I don't have to drive to your studio. You and I can have a conversation of broadcast quality. Why can't we give that to kids in a rural school? Why are we why are we debating economic models when actually, we can find another way that can give connectivity to all of those kids who couldn't get it any other way. And I'm not making an argument for Elon Musk. Please believe me, he's not the most savory person in the world. I saw those two Nazi salutes at the inauguration party. I'm Jewish. I know exactly what that means. I'm not arguing that, because he was born in South Africa, he has to get a better deal. I'm just interested in how those kids get the education they deserve, because that's the important thing.
Toby, much appreciated. Thanks for coming on as always. Staff Magazine editor Toby Shapshak there on that latest proposal being put forward by Starlink, saying, we'll connect 5,000 rural schools. Get this policy across the line and make sure that we are, of course, allowed to retain sole ownership of our operations globally.